And now we're live. How's it going, everybody?
Hey, guys.
Hey, hey.
Hey.
What's up?
Zach, you're looking your best tonight.
Yeah,
I'm looking extra bright on the stream. Let me turn that down.
looking pretty good. Sorry about no video, guys. I initially wasn't even supposed to be here. I'm really sick, but I'm here in spirit and via audio with General Johnson Jameson here with me. He's a celebrity friend of mine. He's sitting in the back. Say hello, General. Hello.
That's actually a reason why we had to keep pushing this back, because people kept getting sick.
Yeah. I've
they
been sick
had-
like twice in the last month myself.
Yeah,
They had something called pneumonia or something. It's a lot.
I got it.
Something to do with pooing, right?
Yeah, I had pneumonia. I was off of work for almost 2 weeks. I was dying, just lying on this couch and playing Tetris 99 all day long.
Do you think it goes like that? You said pneumonia, so is it like oh? Do you think it's something like that?
No, it's when your lungs get infested with feces.
Oh, well, I thought okay.
Cool.
Some guys would pay for that.
Looks like we had some dual audio issues that should now be resolved. Sorry, we're getting set up here with a new setup because of Skype forcing itself on us in unwanted ways with the new version. So we had to switch over right to the new Skype and then use this NDI plugin. So I had basically to rejigger the whole OBS setup. So apologize for that.
I have to say the quality is phenomenal now, Nick. I'm watching
it looks better.
I'm watching the YouTube stream. It's great.
Yeah, the NDI plugin works really well, and it's nice to be able to manipulate the video streams independently, but there's like a weird audio quirk where all of your audios are going through everybody else's mixer line, so kind of duplicated, but should be fixed now.
Okay.
Yep. So cool, it's been a couple months. Who wants to talk about anything interesting that they've been up to? Steve, what have you been doing?
Well, this is actually finally broadcasting from an actual PC, so that's kind of new. I finally got the PC set up here instead of just on the laptop, so I'm able to actually get a lot more work done.
Nice.
And speaking of that, like some of the things that I've been doing resulted in me finding some pretty cool tools that I haven't used yet. One of them I stumbled upon is the TI has this thing called the Analog Engineers Calculator. Just Google Analog Engineer Calculator, and then it's this Windows program that has a bunch of different calculators inside, and there's a little there's a menu, and they have like for data converters, they have here, I'll just read a few off: anti-alias filter designer, alias calculations, ADC code to voltage, and vice versa.
What about a low-pass filter?
Oh,
Let's see.
Jesus.
There is where is that? They do have something like that.
Maybe a Mrs. Butterworth filter calculator.
Find amplifier, stability.
Yeah, a lot of those tools you just put in your like cutoff frequency and a couple parameters and spit something
That's
out.
it.
Ideal convert. So one thing I've been using quite a bit is this find parallel combo with standard R. So I need like a really precise resistor value, and you type in your target and it tries a bunch of parallel ones, and it gives you the result using available resistors. It gives you the result that has the least amount of error versus your target. And actually, I wrote a tool for myself a long time ago that's like this really junky command line tool. I called it Parasist, and I've been using that for a while, but like this is way nicer to use because it's like there's a nice Bob style GUI involved. And so that I've been using that, and then there's like a RC low pass filter. Usually I use Spice to if I want to see, I mean, you could use like a normal calculator and an equation to get the 3 dB cutoff frequency, but what if you want to see the 1 dB point, or like where you have 0.1 dB flatness? It's better to plot the whole thing and move cursors around, and this thing has something like that built in.
So it's a quick like bode plot generator.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, for RC only. But
yeah, okay.
I mean, I still use, like, because I'm so familiar with Spice that I just use that. But like for people who don't want to get involved in learning Spice, you could get this thing. It's pretty nice. Noise, stability, and it also has a really nice like PCB type of things, like impedance calculator, your copper, you put in your copper thickness and distance between traces. It's pretty cool.
So does this tool, Steve, have anything to do with the Analog Engineers pocket reference that you sent?
And
yeah,
that's
thanks a lot for that, by the way.
I was gonna get into that.
You guys got one too, and I was like, "Oh man, Steve is so thoughtful. He sent me one of these." Now it's like I'm just going in the garbage.
Yeah, so
everybody got one of these.
What they're talking about is, like, when I found that calculator, I also found like there was a PDF for this thing, but then you could also buy it for like $5 or $6. And I was like, if I'm buying one of them, I'm paying like $8 for shipping. I might as well buy 5 and just send one to everybody here. So this is pretty cool too. I mean, if you don't want to buy it, I mean, you could get a PDF, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of this. Like, it's good to have just this sitting on your desk, and if you need to like reference some things.
It's awesome. Yeah. It is so good because, you know, I was using it just the other day, and it has a really good section for sort of PCB best practices, and I was looking at trace and track widths in relationship to EMI and inductance and things like that, and it was really nice just to be able to flip through that thing and have a real tangible reference. So thanks a lot for sending that.
Yeah, like here's one. There's some plots for PCB trace resistance versus how many ounces of copper you have.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For me, I like the simple stuff in here, like just a chart of 1% resistor values, right? Like there's a lot of them that I know by heart.
Yes.
I would.
Yeah, like I always would just go Google 1% resistor values and go on the first result and then find the resistor I need. But, you know, having this is so much quicker.
Is that what inspired you to build out that spreadsheet that you sent around?
Yeah, afterwards, yeah.
So for everyone on the stream, Renee made this cool tool, you know, kind of similar to what Steve was talking about, where you put in like a target resistor value, and this thing looks up real resistor values that exist and kind of figures out what you could put together.
Well, it was what it was precisely was it was a calculator for a specific eFuse from TI,
mm-hmm.
right? So in it, I would specify, you know, my under voltage and over voltage lockouts and the current values that I want and so on. And it spits out the proper 1% resistor values that are the closest to my target ranges. And it recalculates the whole thing with the selected 1% and tells me, well, you know, you specified, let's say 4 volts under voltage lockout, but with 1% resistors, you're actually going to get 4.05.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. But yeah, I thought this was cool. And some other things I was looking at was I kind of got into KiCad a little bit because I was asked to give a talk on using Spice within KiCad. There's a conference here in Chicago in April called KiCon. It's the first one they're doing. It's a KiCad conference. And so I will be giving a presentation there on Spice, using Spice in the context of KiCad. And so I had to learn that a little bit. And before the guy asked me, like, hey, can you do like a talk? I'm like, I don't know, I never used it before.
Yeah. It's in your talk proposal. For my talk, I will learn how to use KiCad.
I will learn how to use it, but like have tons of experience with Spice, and so like I realized like I started asking like questions on the forums, and I realized that I was answering my own questions. So, um,
I've been using KiCad for over a year now, and I've accumulated a fairly large library, and all my new designs are obviously in KiCad. Um, I'm not sure if I'm using it how it's meant to be used, because I think, and probably anybody who's designed many PCBs will agree that you probably get stuck in the workflow of the first tool that you learned. So I've been using libraries in the way that you're meant to use libraries in ProTel 99, and I kind of set up KiCad that way. It's probably not how it's meant to be used, but it's working out for me. So
yeah, and one thing I noticed is because I already have used schematic capture tools before, so like a lot of this stuff is the same. It's just like learning a programming language. Like you learn one, and then in another language, like you know the same concepts are there, and like
yeah.
just porting that over is way quicker. So. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was only like learning to use it in the context of getting like spice models to run and stuff like that. But I've already helped a bunch of people on the forums with stuff, and they seem to dig it. So hopefully this talk will be good.
So, are you looking forward to the Cuckold Con?
When is it?
Oh no, I'll probably won't even have the talk ready like the day before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When is it? Beginning of April or?
Like end of April. It's like April 20 something.
Cool. Well, if anyone's in the Chicago area, you should go and support or heckle Steve.
Good at handling hecklers. I appreciate the hecklers too.
Yeah, they have a job to do too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And then the last cool engineering thing I'd talk about is, so these Mountain Dew Game Fuels came out, and they have these resealable lids, which I thought was like really cool engineering until one time I got one that was shooken up, and when I opened it, it like sprayed this mist like all over my jacket. I was having such a good day too. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. I go, and then there's like this spray all over, like this sticky soda-y spray all over, and
So yeah, it doesn't work for a carbonated beverage that could be shooken up, but it is still a pretty cool like design, the way you open and close the can. But Game Fuel tastes terrible, so
this is the only good one.
Just the Mountain Dew. Regular Mountain Dew, yeah.
Mountain Dew flavor, yeah.
Oh, God, Jesus, you're going to have a stroke.
I'm working on it. That's most of my resources are putting into getting a stroke.
You're not gonna beat Bob though, so.
No, actually, it's been proven that those energy drinks are way more harmful for you. I mean, you know, if you drank like a normal human, not like me, I'll probably still die before Steve, but
Jesus.
Yeah, I'll go next. I wanted to mention a couple actual video games that I played recently. One of them being Toe Jam and Earl, which came out finally like 3-4 years later. But it was awesome. I played it with my brother online play, which is a little glitchy. That's probably, or from what I've heard, is a lot better like local play. But, you know, they're working on bug fixes and all that. But it's a really cool game, and if you haven't picked up your copy, I think it's worth it. If you were into the... Like, it's very true to the original game, plus it's got little mini-games that were from the second game, I think. I don't know.
No spoilers,
I've never played the third game, so... Yeah, I'm not going to give any spoilers. I've never played the third game, so I don't know if it incorporated any Toe Jam and Earl 3 stuff. But it was a really fun game, and enjoyed that a lot. I've also tried playing Undertale, because that was a game that I think me and Steve for the last 2 or 3 years just have constantly seen at MagFest. People are like super into that game.
Yeah, like a band is on. They're like, well, you might know this one. It's from Undertale. The crowd goes wild.
Yeah, crowd goes great. And the music in the game is really good. It's just, I don't know, I'm like the whole breaking the fourth wall thing and very self-aware dialogue, trying to be ironically funny. It just doesn't really do it for me. And the battle system is really cool. It's kind of like a shmup built into like a bullet hell, like dodge things as part of the turn-based RPG, but still like not digging the game too much. But yeah, so those are the games, and then of course Tetris 99, which is the best game ever. I've put an insane amount of hours into that game, like every night before I go to sleep. It's just like laying in bed in the dark, you know, playing that until I pass out. It's really, and it's free, so if you have a Switch, you should be playing Tetris 99.
I want to add a note on Tetris 99. Is at first I was playing it on my big screen here, which is like a 55-inch television, and I found that I had a hard time looking at the play fields and spotting the preview pieces, because the next piece is all the way up on the top, and my TV was too large to actually be able to focus on both at the same time.
Yes.
So that game is much, much better played in handheld mode.
I totally agree, and I also really sucked at it on TV, but then I realized that it was because of the Pro controller having like really bad problems with the
D-pad is horrendous.
The D-pad.
Yeah,
you get all these false drops, and it just ruins the game. So yeah,
Do you have enough time during like a toilet session to play a game of Tetris 99?
Oh
yeah, totally. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
It's very important.
So a million years ago, when Verizon first put games on their phones, one of the things was a competition Tetris. So you could like just buy Tetris for $10, or you could pay like a certain amount a month to be in the competition one. And I won a couple times because there was always one guy that would win every day. And whatever day he didn't play, I would win. And you win stupid shit, like, you know, a free comb or something, like, you know, a moisturizer pack, something stupid, right? But yeah, there was a couple of times where I by the time I stood back up, I had lost all the feeling in my legs. And I was like, pins and needles, pins and needles.
Yeah, it's super addictive. So yeah, and then actual work stuff was doing some what I refer to as mechanical Turk work, which is like doing a really repetitive task over and over again until your brain goes numb, which was doing some research on Dreamcast video games. We were interested in understanding the distribution of color bit depth throughout the Dreamcast library, since developers were given the ability to use a few different RGB modes. So I actually went through the entire Dreamcast library and ran it through a custom build of Redream that would spit out which color bit depth it was currently using, and I just recorded it for every single game. And I actually really enjoy those kind of tasks for some reason. I think it's like partially being an engineer, because I sit there and as I'm doing it, I'm trying to figure out ways to do it quicker and more efficiently and plow through 300 some games without killing myself. But yeah, we got that data, and I think it's going to be super interesting to have that data on hand, and maybe one day we'll publish it. We'll see when all this stuff doesn't matter anymore, but it's cool.
You like right now?
Yeah.
How long did all this testing delay the release of the Dreamcast cable?
Well, this testing is for...
Don't kid yourself, Bob. It was already delayed.
Yeah.
It's baked in.
Yeah. But you could imagine
sell that prototype
you could
cable on
imagine
eBay.
potentially circuit design decisions may change if we found out one result versus another. So keep that close to the vest for now. But yeah, it's a cool little project, and got some good data. So that was me. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. First, I want to say in the last almost 2 months since the last stream, I've been working very, very hard on finalizing the PCB for my Universal Mega Dumper version 2. I'd say it's like 95% complete. I'm at the stage now where everything's been routed, everything's been laid out, and I've put it aside for about 2 weeks, and I'm going to look at it again very soon and spot all the mistakes I made, because it's going to be out of my daily routine. But after that, I think, within a couple of weeks, I'm probably going to be ordering some boards for that. I also made a lot of progress on, firmware and setting up a tool chain for the STM32. I built some, test USB firmware with some of their def boards, and I got it communicating with the computer with Python and so on. So I've been, having nothing but success on that front, which was really great. The other thing I did a lot of during my time off of work when I was sick with pneumonia was play a lot of video games, like I mentioned with Nick earlier. Aside from spending probably 20 plus hours playing Tetris 99, I I installed a nifty little program that it's probably existed for a very long time, but I wasn't aware of it. It's called GZ Doom, which allows you to play Doom WAD files on a modern computer. So I played through the entire episode 1, Knee Deep in the Dead of Doom, which was the free shareware version back in 1993. And within 5 minutes of starting to play it, I had forgotten how freaking awesome Doom is. It completely blew my mind, and I played through the entire first episode. I was hooked onto the keyboard, and it's a fun experience. Anyone who had a 486 back then, or had a friend that they exploited their 486 to play Doom, which is what I did. I highly recommend that you'll play through the Doom episodes again, because they're awesome. I still think that's some of the best first-person shooter action ever.
Oh yeah.
Me and Steve used to do direct dial computer
Dwango, baby.
for Z Doom back in high school.
Z-Doom DOS.
Yeah. And it was awesome, having mouse look and playing the game that way, cooperatively, so much fun. And the only pain was dial-up would get out of sync every once in a while. So I would see Steve doing something that he had done 10 minutes ago, and it just it'd be
It's
all
why are you
messed
running
up.
into that wall for the past 2 minutes?
Yeah.
What are you shooting at?
Yeah. But it was sweet.
And the other thing I want to talk about is a bit of drama that keeps happening again, and it's just I debated with myself a lot today as to how I would address this tonight, and I thought I would be aggressive, I thought it would be insulting, I thought it would be sarcastic and whatnot, but finally I settled on I'm going to explain this one last time like you're all 5 years old. So you
think you could dumb it down a little more so I can understand it?
Yeah, I mean, we're already 5 years old, so can we try for less than that?
So to clarify, so the guy from Pico or Pico Interactive, however the fuck you say it.
Eli. His name's Eli.
Eli, the Pico guy.
That sounds funny. It's a nice ring to it. Eli, the Pico guy.
He keeps claiming every couple of months or so that this whole designing game cartridges properly is a hoax, orchestrated by people like me and infinite NES lives in order to profit. I'm not sure how I profit, because I don't actively sell any game PCBs to anyone. I mean, to be fair, I've designed game PCBs for people who have approached me, but I don't broadcast or offer that service to the public. I select who I want to work with. Anyway.
Do you want to work with Pico?
No. Although I do want to buy one of his games now.
Yeah, I threw the one that I bought from them out right in the old trash.
Well, it was shit, right? And not just...
It was really bad.
The electrical design was only a small part of what was bad with it too, right? So...
No, it barely fit into the Genesis. It wasn't beveled. It used crappy plating that scraped off in one insertion. It was no good.
So for people that don't know the history, the voltage thing I'll let Renee do, but the beveled edges thing is something that applies to any PCB that goes into a slot. So that's
just
something,
games, yeah.
Yeah, not just games, and that's something that I took for granted before you guys explained it to me. And then I started paying attention to which consoles I had that I was using crappy PCBs in, and coincidentally, they were the ones that were having the most problems. So yeah, it's a lot worse than people like to think it is. But
In fairness, this is a game that I bought from them years ago, and they could be doing things totally different now. It would be worth checking out. This was the Duke Nukem on Sega Genesis release, and it was a piece of garbage. The through holes on it were just trimmed to like this long. They were just sticking out all over the place. It was ridiculous. Anyway,
so I decided I'm going to make an analogy with these plastic cups and marbles, so people will finally understand what this whole voltage problem is all about. So I've got these plastic cups, and this size of plastic cup, I didn't have 3 yellow ones, I'm sorry.
The OCD is killing me here right now, but continue.
These plastic cups represent 5-volt devices on the bus of, let's say, a Sega Genesis, okay? We're going to have the CPU here. Here we're going to have the internal system RAM. And here we're going to have a cartridge, which is 5 volts, because these are all equal. Okay, so I'm going to put 5 volts worth of marbles in the CPU.
Jesus.
Okay.
did you practice this?
No, I didn't practice this.
Rehearsal.
So the CPU would like to write a value into RAM. All right, it's going to write 5 volts into the
Jesus.
I wasn't supposed to drop any. Sorry. Now people are confused. Okay,
CPU looks like it was programmed by me.
and that's all great, right?
Leakage current.
And we're going to remember as well that all these devices exist in parallel on the bus. So the capacity of the bus is only equal to the smallest on all of them, right? And now, if we want to read back from the RAM, the CPU will ask the RAM to read a value, right? And that amount of voltage is tolerable by the cartridge, and it goes back into the CPU, and everyone's happy. All right. But now, if we reduce the cartridge from 5 volts to this smaller cup, which is transparent, I'm sorry.
How many volts is that cup?
This cup is 3.3 volts, and it's not the scale, I'm sorry.
You didn't have time to prepare the model, did you?
No. So now, we're going to start with a read from the cartridge to show that that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to place 3 marbles in this cup. The CPU would like to read a value from the cartridge. Okay. This 3 volts has no problem with the system RAM, right? The system RAM can tolerate 3 volts, and the CPU reads it and is perfectly happy. And I'm going to get rid of these 3 marbles now. But now what if the CPU asks to read a value from RAM? The RAM, which is operating at 5 volts, will try to drive 5 volts onto the bus. But, and this is where things go wrong, the 5 volts...
This time it was intentional.
Yeah, the 5 volts doesn't fit in the cartridge because it's 3.3 volts. So now we got a whole bunch of marbles everywhere. And in the real world, this is energy dissipated as heat.
This was actually my biggest complaint about the Duke Nukem cartridge. Is I opened it up and marbles just fell everywhere.
Right?
So the moral of the story is Renee lost his marbles?
Yes. But I mean, the point is, I mean, and I was going to say with all due respect, but no, I don't respect the guy. He keeps saying, these cartridges won't damage your console, blah, 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 blah. No, they won't. I mean, I think 30 plus years of Genesis history have proven that the thing is built like a tank. And the whether it's, I think it's NMOS or PMOS drivers in there are perfectly fine with driving all that extra current into the cartridge, right? The problem that I've always talked about is the cartridge itself. And that's where the marbles don't fit, is in the cartridge. That's where the extra heat energy is dissipated, right?
Right. That's where the power dissipation takes place.
So
in the memory.
Yeah. The simple fact that, you know, these hoax screamers are going around and saying, oh no, it's not going to damage your console, just proves that they don't even understand what the problem is. So they're arguing about the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's what always bothered me is I always hear about console. And then I'm like, well, doesn't anybody care about the actual cartridge you're buying? Like,
yeah,
do you not care that it's going to have a reduced life? Like, that. Remember that thing I sent you guys, the Paprium documentary part 2?
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody who's interested in this should look this up, at least at the, I think, 11:30 timestamp. Is you have the engineer who designed the PCB for Watermelon Games for Pure Solar for Genesis, and he's talking about the original design plus the redesign that he was still reluctant on releasing. Like, he knew it reduced the risk of damage on the carts, it lowered it, but it wasn't the ideal. And he ended up saying, like, ideally, if you're going to make this, you put level translators on the
Yeah, I really don't understand the confusion, or I really don't. I don't understand the unwillingness to do this properly. I mean, you know, I designed very recently a 64 megabit flash apparatus for real SNES cartridges. If any of you guys have seen those videos that I've posted in the these past couple of days, it's effectively the same thing, only it has 64 megabits of memory, and I translate everything. I translate the address bus and I translate the data bus all in the size of a goddamn DIP42 package or DIP36. I don't know. You have all this real estate on a board. Why not just throw some goddamn 245s on there and call it a day?
That's what bothers me the most is for most of these devices, you need to add 2 extra ICs, 2 245s, like you said, right? Like a 164 245, or just a straight 245 if you don't need to go bidirectional. You're adding at most like $2.50 worth of parts and a couple of hours worth of routing for a proper design. I'm sure, I mean, I don't expect all the consumers to understand this engineering issue, but if you tell them, well, the product costs $2.50 more to be properly designed up to spec, I don't think anyone has an issue with that.
I think it really comes down to, I don't think this is a matter of people trying to cut corners and cut costs. I think this is a matter of I think it's a total matter of competency. I think, and a lack thereof, because, you know, it's not even that this is difficult. Hell, as far as that goes, you know, you have a couple 245s on there, for example. You don't even, the only thing that has to translate bidirectionally is the data bus. The address bus, you just sit on there, and you don't have to send that back and forth. I mean, this is really easy. So I don't understand. I don't know how you could design or route a cartridge like this and not fundamentally understand these very basic tenets of voltage. I don't understand it.
Well, I don't think it's that. I think it's that people just don't understand the problem. And then I think it's the same things that we've seen for years now, since before we even all started doing this podcast, is that there's the one problem where, for whatever reason, and I've actually reached out to Shrinks about this and asked if there was a better explanation or a better way to handle it. But sometimes if you just tell people in the nicest, most polite way possible, hey, that thing that you just bought, it's actually not good. I made the same mistake too. Here's why. They lose their fucking minds. And I don't, like, that's a weird thing to me. Not all people, but it does happen. And then there's the ignorance of people making these things, and then they just go, I don't want to deal with this. I'm sure it's fine. It's not going to kill anybody's consoles, which it probably won't. But the problem that I have with this situation is the same problem I have with anytime you guys see me lose my shit, it's always the same thing. It's pathological liars. Because somebody who's great at lying, like if I left your house and I get on the plane, right? So I'm stuck up in the air for a couple hours with no Wi-Fi, and you jump on Twitter and you were like, hey, when Bob left, he fucking smacked me right in the face. Can you believe that shit? I was so nice to him. I hung out for days. By the time I got off the plane, there would be this great elaborate story, and people would ask me, I'd have been like, I don't fucking hate anybody. And that's how I would have handled it. Whatever. But the liars usually get all of the attention because they're good at it. And especially pathological liars that convince themselves that they're telling the truth. So you got guys like Eli who, like, I know I shouldn't have bothered. I know it wasted my time posting in that forum. But he just lie after lie after lie about
that's the only reason we're
shit.
even in bringing this up, right? Like, if he was just making whatever 3.3 volt carts still, and this wouldn't have been a topic this week. It was that he went on the forum and
lied.
Basically calling out Renee
a liar.
Yeah, I could really care less if he sells shitty products, because he's not the only person out there that sells shitty products. Like Bob said, I have a problem with people calling me a liar because I in no way have profited from this. And that's what he claims too, is that people like me and Paul from NES Lives have, I don't even know why he included NES Lives in this anyways, but he did on some YouTube comment. He says that we have come up with this hoax in order to sell our products. Well,
and he basically said that you were trying to sneak in and undercut and steal his business from other people to get the thing, and all of which is definitely false.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, I designed PCBs for 2 Mega Drive releases, but that's because those people approached me. I don't even say on my website you can contact me to have a cartridge designed, because I don't want people to contact me for that shit.
Well, my favorite part of the last Pico incident was when he passive-aggressively threatened to write something bad about me in his magazine. And then when I brought that up again, he said I lied about that, so I did what I always do in situations like that. I posted a fucking screenshot of what he sent me. That's the thing that blows my mind about pathological liars. They wrote an email. Everybody saves email nowadays. Gmail, you just hit fucking archive and it's there forever. So how are you going to write something in writing and then lie and say that you didn't say it when you know goddamn well I still got the fucking email? It just blows my mind how some people's brains work.
I don't save all emails. If it comes from @retrorgb.com, it goes to spam and then automatically deleted.
There's something I want to add to this too, is part of my research when I wrote the original article like a million years ago is I actually contacted some FAEs, field applications engineers from Macronics, which is a fairly substantial flash IC company. They produce the MX 29F and whatever lines of flash devices. And I asked them specifically, like, hey, I know the data sheet says the maximum is such and such values, percentage of VCC and whatnot. But what if, I was to do this in a design? Is that okay with the silicon? And I got a fairly straight answer from the FAEs, within hours. That was like, no, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. I probed I probed some more. Well, what if this and what if that? And, it's just, we would put some resistors in line, right? It's going to protect it. Or what if I use a voltage regulator instead? Whatever the fuck that does to fix the problem. And, still, they're like, no, you shouldn't do that. We put those absolute maximum values in a data sheet for a reason. And the silicon does not support anything above that. They don't guarantee device performance above that. It's very plain and simple.
What do you think? Do you think that is it an appropriate testing methodology to take as a company who produces this hardware, is it an appropriate testing methodology to take your childhood SNES, put it in your closet, and connect it for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, stress testing these 3-volt flash cartridges, and if it doesn't burn up, you give it the green thumb and you say, this is in good shape. We're ready to take this product to market. Let's do this.
Well, they
Actually,
can do that if they're comfortable with it. I don't care.
Well, that was
Zach,
that's what he said.
Yeah.
That's what he said in the tweet. That's exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost. I'm paraphrasing, but that's practically verbatim. That's exactly how he's concluded that A, you're a hoax propagator, and that you have
fake
your own
news.
you have your own vested interests because you're making money somehow on this, and B, it validates the shit that he wants. Not the shit. It validates whatever wares he wants to sling around for himself, for his company. So
Yeah, frankly, I would have bought one of his new, because Pico just announced like 12 more games they're coming out with, and I would have bought one of them. Looks kind of cool, but I just don't. And even if it was designed improperly, like if the cart dies out, after I play it a few times, fine, whatever. I lose $30 or whatever they're charging. But just the way they've treated Renee and responded to things. When I sent them pictures of their PCB and they threw the designer under the bus.
Yeah. It's not just me too, because there's at least like 2 or 3 people yesterday that asked on Twitter, "Well, is your cartridge properly designed?" And they were just blocked by Pico. They didn't get a proper answer or anything like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not going to support that.
Yeah, these are potential customers that want to buy the product, and they're just inquiring about the build quality of the product, and he just goes out and blocks them.
Well, I mean, it's
That's
really
ridiculous.
obvious. This is the wrong community. If you're going to conduct yourself like that, you'll never survive in this community if you have enough loud people that are witness to that. I'm sorry. I mean, you can't do that around these parts, boys.
Well, a few things, though. Zach, you were actually wrong in your analogy because the people that we've seen that have acted like this, their testing methodology is that they sold a handful and no one returned them, therefore the product has to be flawless.
That's true.
That's their testing methodology.
Would you guys be more respectful if the individual designer, whatever company, like gave you their rationale, like a technical rationale on why they think that the risk isn't this high versus the cost of the product, and that it is? Of course, they could put like more circuitry and make it more robust, but at this level of price, that this type of design justifies the amount of risk.
No,
would you
I
guys
don't
be
think...
more responsive to that? Like,
no,
we did this calculations. If we put resistors here, it limits the current and the heat to this much. Therefore, the IC, if it's rated for a life of X amount of years, you'll get.
And are they writing this analysis from the ice wall? Because I've heard great analogies and explanations about flat earthers too. No, I wouldn't believe it, but I absolutely would not be here talking shit. The problem that I have with this is the lies and the pushback and the attack. So if somebody said, look, I don't really know. I'm not a designer. If Eli's taken this, I'm not an electrical engineer. I hired other people to do it. This is what they gave me. They promised me it was okay. This is as best I could do. If anybody really has a problem, I'll return it. But as far as I know, it won't hurt your console. It might just lower the life of this cartridge. We would never be having this conversation. All right, well, here, look, man, here's some tips on how to do it for next time. Here's Renee's email. May have him design the PCB. Everybody would be chill about it. It's the lies and the bullshit that drives me insane.
There is a point to what Steve's getting at here, though. What if the fix for this was not a $2 part? What if this fix was a $15 part? And as Steve was saying, you look at it, you make a judgment, you say, okay, well, X percent of these are, based on what I know, are going to fry after 15 years if, people play them a whole bunch. And it's just, it's going to raise the cost of this thing too much.
But but when you throw that out there like that, that is too much of a departure from what we're talking about right now. Yes, maybe what Steve's talking about, maybe his scenario, I could almost buy that. But I mean, we're talking about this thing, and in the context of what we're talking about, regardless of their transparency uh, to whatever they're doing, I don't care how transparent they are. If it's predicated on a bunch of erroneous nonsense, like that Ben Vin video. No offense, Ben Vin, but that video you did was ridiculous. I'm sorry. That is not. That's not kosher for me.
I like what Steve said. I agree with what Steve said. If Pico doesn't come out and say, "Oh, don't believe that 3.3 volt hoax nonsense. Our carts won't damage the console." Blah blah blah. If instead he came out with something like Steve said, "Oh well, we analyzed the risk and we think that based on this and this values and this test data that we're happy with the additional risk that this presents, and we still guarantee this product for X amount of years, blah, blah, blah." That is a million times a better reply than "don't believe the 3.3 volt hoax."
So the reason I think that they would lean towards the hoax is, for most cases, the cart will probably not be an issue. People will not play that game enough times for it ever to matter, right? So what it's going to look like to your end consumer is, yeah, I never had a problem with this cart, and maybe 0.1% of the stuff they sell will have a problem, and down the line they can just be like, I don't know, you've owned that cart for 15 years, man. I can't really give you a warranty on that anyway. No one's going to be any the wiser that it was this issue. So that's, I mean, there's no incentive to come out and be like, yeah, we know there's a problem. The incentive is to be like, there's no problem. What are you talking about? This is going to be fine. And everyone else is, or most people are going to experience that reality that it is fine. And so...
Yeah, that's like kind of something I wanted to talk about. I don't know if we're talking about it later today or maybe on a future podcast, where you have person A or company A who is ignorant of the issues and arrives at a result, versus company B who has evaluated three or more different paths, various paths, and knows all the details, but based on risk calculations and costs, ended up picking the same result that the ignorant person had. But they're upfront about why they chose that. Whereas the ignorant company would, like Nick said, wouldn't even mention it. I feel like the consumer would rather pick the ignorant person that doesn't come up front and tell them that they calculated this problem, that it won't be a risk, and they just don't tell anybody about it, versus the company that is upfront about it. So like Nick said, I don't think there's incentive for company B to exist when company A can just get away with this.
That's a different scenario. If we want to get into that, that's cool, but that's a different scenario.
Yeah. Totally, and I'm down with that. I'm totally down with that too. But that's such a departure from, I think, from this, because it's not a $15 part. It's probably 65 cents worth of parts and a couple hours of routing. That is the difference between a part that
what
is being
if
violated
it's not even
not.
parts? What if it's R&D work for 6 months versus not doing any of that?
Yeah, we're not being specific to the 3.3 volt case anymore.
I'm talking in general.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just a non-technical analogy is something that I run into all the time, in that I'll get a message from somebody saying, "Hey, I saw this page on your site. This information's outdated. Just wanted to let you know. Will you update it?" And if I were Eli, I would say, "Screw you, it's fine. That information's perfect. It's not outdated. You don't know what you're talking about. You're the one lying." But what I actually say is, I know. I don't know. I'm one person. I'm only having new people on it now. I'm doing my best, but There's a lot of pages that are just going to be outdated until I can get to them. And their response is almost always like, oh, I get it. Some people are like, cool, let me know if I could help. But nobody's mad at me for that because I was just honest. Like, hey, I'm trying my best, but this is all I could do. And still sort of valid, but definitely outdated. And, that is nothing technical. So I think anybody could picture this in their brain, because I'm not fighting somebody for calling me out on something that's definitely wrong. Or if not wrong, not right, 100% right. And that's just my attitude is like, I'm doing my best, here you go. And people aren't mean to me about that. And it's just, I feel like the Eli's of the world are just their brain doesn't grasp it. In fact, the whole pattern, it's very draconian. It's very Draken-like. It's the same,
Nice.
harp on one detail, go back to it, over-explain it, try to change what you said before. It drives me crazy. I don't, I can't fathom it.
Another an analogy I just thought of when you were talking is the choice you make on how fast you drive on the highway.
As fast as I possibly can, all the time.
So I'm going to use kilometers here because the whole world uses that except for you guys, right?
That's so dumb that we don't use it.
So you go on the highway and it says you should be driving 100 kilometers per hour, right? That's the maximum you should be driving on.
Used to get on the highway at 100.
Yeah. You get on the highway, no one's driving 100 kilometers an hour, or barely anybody's driving 100 kilometers an hour. Most people will choose to drive 105, 110, right? And they'll get home and they'll say, well, I drove 110 all my life and I never got in an accident, right? And they'll tell all their friends and they say, oh, well, I exceeded the spec of the highway and I was perfectly fine and that was fine. But I mean,
the spec of the highway, that's so good.
I'm 100% positive that if you look at the entire data for an entire country and you would plot who drove 100 kilometers per hour and how many of those people got into an accident versus how many people drove 105 and got into an accident, there would be a slight difference, right? And this is the kind of issue that we're talking about when we're talking about the voltage incompatibilities, right? If you use one of these cartridges, doesn't mean it's going to die right away. It doesn't mean that your console is going to blow up in flames in a Hiroshima mushroom cloud, right?
I still love that I made that. It's one of my proudest moments. Continue. Sorry.
It just means that there's a higher probability that it will fail earlier than if you would not use it out of spec. Right? You're probably fine if you drive on the highway 110 most of your life. But a sample size of 1 can prove any bias. If you select 100,000 people and they all speed, they will surely have more accidents than a group of 100,000 people who don't speed on the highway, right? So you have to look at the big picture, not just one particular usage case.
Yeah, it's all risk calculation.
Well, I'm going to be getting on my motorcycle and riding 5 volts all the way down the highway, baby.
All right, let's move this along.
Let's move on.
We've slammed this topic to the ground.
This is the 4th episode.
Never talking about this again on the stream, ever.
Yeah, if Eli bothers anybody, just ask them where their copy of Jim Powers is, and then he'll block you and never talk to you again. That's a thing, by the way. Google it on my website. That was another thing that he did. But continue.
I was just gonna pass it off to Zach, who wanted to talk about some Lost in Translation movie. He saw it for the first time this year or something.
Yeah, great movie. I love Meg Ryan. So at the tail end of 2018, I was working on a few things that I thought would be pretty damn cool. It was actually one of the few projects that I actually really enjoyed working on because I've seen this need or this large gap in this community in regard to, I don't want to say reproduction carts because I don't like that because that implies blatant piracy, but I'd like to say conversion carts. What is a conversion card? So, for example, you have a bunch of great games on the Famicom and Super Famicom that are exclusive to those territories. Well, fortunately, people around the world have translated a lot of these games into our native tongue. Games like Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy V, Earthbound, well, technically Earthbound or Mother, but all this stuff. But if you've seen my video on making, converting a Famicom cartridge, it's a pretty convoluted and kind of a messy task. So I wanted to do something really simple. And so it took me a few months to really sort of iron everything out to make it as simple and as polished as I could. But I've made these little conversion apparatuses that allow you to make whatever sort of conversion game, as we'll call it, whatever conversion game you'd like to make, you can make with the minimalist amount of toolage. You can do anything that you want to do without rewiring or rerouting anything, without having to have a desoldering system to remove old mask ROMs. But the most important component is that you can do all of this and be 110% non-destructive, so that everything on the board remains intact, nothing is really modified, the mask ROMs stay on board. You just decouple them from the bus, and it just, UV proms are great, and I still use them, and there's still definitely a place for them. But these ROMs are getting older, and you just don't know how much bit rot is going to be on there, or how long those gates are going to hold a charge, because you're reprogramming already a 25-year-old EEPROM, and you just don't know, right? So I've adopted Flash.
Can I jump in here?
Mm-hmm.
I'll interject on the UV EEPROM. The first run of Tanglewood was made with UV EEPROM. At the request of the developer, and the factory had a tremendously hard time getting any sorts of reasonable quality numbers on programming UV EEPROMs and filtering out the bit rot of those chips. So that's absolutely right what you're saying. You can buy 1,000 of these and only get 700 or 800 that actually work properly. It's horrendous yield.
Yep. And by the way, if you're going to use UV EEPROMs, if you're going to do that, verify it after you burn the chip. Wait a couple of hours and then verify it again. Don't go jamming that thing onto a board. Give it a few hours and see if the data changes. Okay, so anyways, we've migrated over to flash memory that's readily available and that's inexpensive for the most part, and is just more conducive and modern. So that's what I've been working on a lot. I've released several little demo videos over the course of maybe 4 or 5 days here. And I'm actually going to work on a really cool YouTube video that I'm going to spend a lot of time on, that's not going to just show you, how to burn these things, or how to, solder these things together, but, you want to take your cartridge, you want to dump the memory from your cartridge, and you want to apply whatever patch that you would like to apply to your cartridge. For example, Final Fantasy V. Well, I'm going to show you how to do all of that. Dump your cartridge, apply your patch, burn the game to ROM, apply the ROM to cart, and then you're off to the races. I think it's going to be pretty cool, and I think this I hope that this sort of changes the course in how people do this in the future. That was the goal, was to kind of streamline this in a way.
So I have a question. Like, let's say I have a Secret of Evermore and I want to have it be 2-player. Would I be able to dump my Secret of Evermore and then apply like the 2-player patch to it and then install it in my Secret of Evermore? Now I have a 2-player ready Secret of Evermore.
That's
when
right,
UMD
Steve.
is ready, you'll be able to easily do that.
Awesome.
That's right. I'm working right now because Renee doesn't have anything I can use. I'm working with Paul's Infinite NES Lives. He has that INL retro dumper that has an SNES interface, an NES interface, a Famicom interface, an N64 interface, a Game Boy interface. But the problem is that the tools or the software is pretty crappy. No offense, Paul, but you know that. it's all in Lua scripts, and you have to invoke scripts and edit parameters and take things out. I know he's working really hard on putting some polish in a good back-end software solution, but that's what I'm using right now, and that's probably what I'm going to use in the YouTube video. Please, Jesus, Paul, get a goddamn GUI going. But at any rate,
can I interrupt 1 second here, Steve? Is there something that's like modifying your Skype at all? Because your camera window keeps randomly resizing itself. I have no idea what the hell is going on. Even when I lock it on OBS, maybe
it's because I'm moving from left and right. Should I try to?
No, I don't think that's it. I don't know if you were resizing your Skype window or something, but every once in a while it just like gets the size of the entire window or shrinks. I have no idea why.
I don't think it's doing that in the stream.
Yeah, it totally is. Because I have to keep resizing it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll just keep fixing it.
So anyways, that's what I have, and I'm doing some 3D printing stuff because that's cool, and I want to do a lot of stuff with that, and that's my update.
Way to suck the life out of the end of Zach's update, Nick. Good job.
Sorry, it's just driving me nuts.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick. I'm really having a good time here.
I think the issue with Steve's stream is that there are not enough Dreamcasts in the background.
Look, I gotta be honest,
they're on the floor, Renee.
Ever since Zach posted the first picture of this project in the chat, I think he thinks I'm fucking with him or something. But I'm genuinely really excited for that. The whole, for the both of the ones that he was working on, NES and SNES. Because I've seen so many hack jobs, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that do really, really great reproductions, but I've seen so many hack jobs, or I've seen people just spend a ridiculous amount of time and money to do something that this could accomplish for much cheaper. So yeah, I'm happy to see that, and I hope everybody that does repros would at least look into that to try to adopt it.
That's right.
Nick, there's somebody donated $20 in the top chat. I think we should.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you to Duck Fu. His question is, I like to use leaded solder and watched one of Bob's video, and he does the same thing as me, where I breathe in and exhale, blowing the fumes away from me. I don't want to be like Bob. Can you recommend a fume extractor?
I use it's a Hako knockoff. You just type in fume extractor, and it's probably going to be the first thing that you see. Soldering fume extractor, but
like on eBay, I think, or Amazon, or
go to eBay. I think it's Aoy, AOY. Let's see, AOYUE. They've carbon copied the Hako extractor, and really, it's just a fan with a carbon filter. There's no reason to pay an arm and a leg for that. But yeah, it's pretty good.
So I have something that I've been using that I think is the coolest fucking thing ever. Let me even turn on another light so everybody can see better. So I got the fan back there, the window fan, which I use sometimes. And I'm by a window, but let me get the thing out. I have this device that's like it sucks better than anything I've ever seen before. It is the Voltar Sucks 3101. It is property of me. Sucks so good, it's approved by HD Retrovision. Definitely has nothing to do with that maple syrup moose riding guy from DB Electronics. With an American flag, made in USA mostly. It's 3D printed. It comes with a glow-in-the-dark thing. You could choose to plug it in with a power supply, or even have one of these things where like you stick batteries in it and it powers it for you. But I find this to be very handy when I'm not getting high off the leaded fumes. I think it's perfect, and coincidentally the window's right there, and it even has the little lock there, so it's very hard to do this one-handed, but yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to add is the leaded isn't relevant. It's you don't heat up the solder hot enough for lead to get into the air.
Yeah, lead doesn't get it to its boiling point.
Yeah, you're heating up the flux.
Yeah, it's the flux.
But those fumes are still bad. But I just wanted to point out, if you're using lead-free solder, you also have the same terrible fumes. So it doesn't matter if it's leaded or
lead. I think you're missing the point that nothing sucks better than Voltar. I got that point
for Voltar. It's quite clear.
Approved by HD Retrovision. Sucked
Yes,
by
I
the
approved
car.
it.
Although Steve, I'll point out, at my first job, I've seen some senior engineers use leaded solder, and then they run out of hands, like a soldering iron and tweezers, so they will hold the leaded solder in their mouth.
Yep.
So that's where the leaded versus non-leaded is kind of going to make a difference.
You're in the solid food territory, yeah.
I do that.
I,
Sometimes.
I saw we got a question from Firebrand X. What do we think about the datasheet warriors? What
You
is
know,
what is a datasheet warrior, first of all?
Isn't
Well-
that
That's me.
Zach?
I am the datasheet warrior.
We have an armchair engineer and a datasheet warrior in this fucking podcast. How lucky are we?
Yep. You get everything. We're covering all angles. Oh, J.A. Jennings asks, why do you always... I don't know who... Are you referring to somebody specifically, sir?
I
Why
assume
do
he's
you always...
referring to you because of your tweet that everybody took strangely.
You know, I don't mean to sound rude, but is it... I didn't infer anything with my tweet. I don't know if this is a comprehension issue or if this is just people trying to be glib, but I never once in my recommendation demonized or ostracized retro gaming cables. People ask me all the time who I personally recommend, and I just happen to recommend retro console accessories. Yeah, and you can see I'm
Retro
not being,
access now.
whatever.
Retro access.
Well, it's a stupid name. No offense, Rich. But the point is what I'm going to say is, and it's not biased because she's in America. Look at my past tweets about her. I've given that woman pure shit and said that what she was doing was shit, and that she was fucking things up in life. But you know what? She's really receptive to criticism, and she's a little crazy, but she's a nice person, and she wants to improve things.
She addresses
so-
issues that are
She
raised.
actually
she's in the
addresses
chat,
issues.
Zach.
Is she in chat?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, where you at? Where you at, girl? Where you at? I didn't see her, but at any rate, I don't see her in chat. I think you're lying, Bob. Lay off the whiskey. But you know, she's very receptive. She's very receptive to criticism, and you know, she's willing to improve. I'm not now. That's not inferring or insinuating that Rob isn't. This is just my recommendation. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, great. But it is what it is.
My
Yeah, it's
problem
really
with
weird
Rob.
that somebody would have taken my recommendation is X to mean I hate Y. Like,
I never said that.
yeah, that wasn't in the tweet at all.
I don't hate Rob or anything, and I have never really spoken for or against any of these people. But the problem I had with Retro Gaming Cables UK was, I think it was a year or two ago, they posted a model on their website about how they tested a certain cable or whatnot, and the model was completely wrong, and the math was wrong behind it, and I had a problem with that. I recall Steve had looked at it too. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, Steve, but
Oh, I do, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know
there
exactly
was-
what you're talking
there
about
was
because
a
I talked to.
there was a Thevenin equivalent on there, and we were like, where the hell does this value come from? And it made no sense whatsoever. And
It was like the model was specifically created to validate the conclusion that was already drawn.
yeah,
It was very strange, and
Right,
I think he ended up taking it down.
Yeah, but I talked to him about that. I actually talked to Rob about that, and I'm sorry, the data there was absolutely shaped and modeled around an idea of what or how he thought things were electrically happening, and it just wasn't the case. And yeah, that had to, you know.
I think it's drummer syndrome. I think it's the same thing when a band gets a new drummer and they're like, "Oh, how's your new drummer?" And they're like, "Oh, they're great. They're wonderful." "Oh, so your last drummer sucked?" No, it's not. It's not at all. And that happens every time any band replaces a member. A large group of people always assume that praising the new person shits on the last person.
Well, you know, I can.
I still
can
think
only-
Mike Portnoy was better.
I
I
do
can
too,
only speak-
100%.
I can only speak from personal. I can only speak from personal experience, and I can tell you that, yeah, I've repaired a few of Rachel's cables in the very distant past. But I've repaired a hell of a lot more retro gaming cables for a lot of different reasons, and it's just more labor for me because I'm going to do it. And when these cables start popping people's consoles, and fuses start blowing, and I have to repair 4 or 5 or 6 of those, and I don't say anything. I try to be really nice about it, but when it just keeps happening and happening, I might make a little tweet about it. Yeah, I'm not saying anything bad, but my opinion is predicated on my personal experience, and it is what it is. I'm not saying anything bad about the guy. Penis puns.
Well,
Yeah, my
I'll tell you,
current opinion. It's subject to change.
my opinion has been the same for a few years now, and I always say this, and once again, drummer syndrome, it always gets taken the wrong way. But I think that both of those companies, as well as Insurrection with theirs, have great cables, and the only opinion that I have is don't buy the garbage $5 cables. That's the only very, very strong opinion that I have in that. And that, everybody has their niche. They have the one cool thing that they do. I don't think Rob even sells BNC cables, and they're outside of arm's range. I have Rachel's here. That's awesome. Everybody has their thing. Whatever you do, just stay away from those $5 cables unless you have a specific reason. Like, there's been a few times I bought those because I just wanted a free SCART connector and a SNES connector on the end, but like, don't use them as your cables. That's the only suggestion I would have is like, don't go with the shit ones.
The only suggestion I have for you, Bob, is can you close that goddamn window? I mean, who's robbing a fucking bank downtown? Okay. Jesus, what is this? The ending to Heat? Yeah, starring Val Kilmer. You know what I'm saying?
Welcome to every day of my life here.
Fuck that. So, but no, Rob makes. I'm sure if you buy a cable from Retro Gaming Cables, I'm sure it's going to be a good cable. If you buy a cable from Retro Access, I'm sure it's going to be a great cable. Please don't make things up. That simply don't put words into my mouth, please. But do not also put things in my butt either.
No, you welcome those.
Paul Ramos had an interesting comment. I'm curious, Paul, he said he won a Keysight scope. Is that something you won from Electro Boom?
Did you?
Because that would be really cool.
Wow.
I have the T-shirt today.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, that same shirt, just much bigger.
I love when it used to be to enter his contest, you have to comment, give me the Mita or whatever.
Oh, I did it every time.
Yeah. Now I think, at least last time I saw him do a giveaway, it was their Wave giveaway. I don't know what that was. I feel like I haven't watched an Electro Boom video in a while. I probably need to catch up on a bunch.
I've seen everyone. I like them all. I loved the one that he did that started out fake, where he was doing the fake energy thing. That was great.
Oh yeah, the infinite energy machines.
Mm.
Yeah, I used to get notifications when he had videos. I haven't seen him in a while, so I don't know what's up.
I think the question is mainly for Voltar. When are we going to get a video of you adjusting lasers?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Did somebody ask that?
Yeah.
Every time we've spoken the past month.
Any chance we can get some videos on how to adjust lasers for disc-based consoles?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been on the back burner. That's been sort of it's been in queue for quite a while. It's really a matter of just picking the best system to start out with. I was thinking about doing a 1000 series PlayStation 1, but I actually might think I'll do a 5000. Jesus Christ. I think I might actually do a 5000 series PS1. Because yeah, Bob, thanks. Everyone knows what a goddamn 1000 series is. Jesus Christ. Go hack up another lung. But,
neither was coughing.
It was me.
Oh. Well,
I'm
whatever.
We're all old and dying. Fuck it.
I can't tell anymore. But no, I think I might do maybe a 5000 series PlayStation 1, because one of the main differences between the 5000 series and the 7000 series is that the Mechacon on the 7000 series is pretty much almost self-calibrating. You can adjust the voltage across the laser pickup, but on the 5000 series, you actually have a little more control of doing a manual calibration, but you don't have to do the bias and the gain and there's just really one pot that you have to adjust the RF eye pattern. So yeah, maybe that might be a collaboration video with Hopefully Alex Jones or George Soros. I don't know.
No,
it on the Rogan
I have the
podcast.
documents.
Yeah, but I mean, I've always seen, the people kind of like still image of them tuning lasers, and they always have the oscilloscope up and the sinusoidal waves kind of overlaid on each other. It would just be cool for someone to explain what's going on there. I think that would be really valuable and interesting to learn, because I don't know what's going on with that myself.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. That would be. I think that'd be a pretty good video. Let's do it.
Hey Zach, would you want me to send you that Owan scope?
No.
Just so I can do it too.
No.
Send him a Keysight scope.
You are gonna get the biggest box of Game Gears you've ever seen.
You will be hunted down.
That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. It's coming to you in a console.
God
He has a bunch.
damn it.
Let's go to some of these questions that were submitted on comments in
Okay.
previous videos. I have a question about PCB finish on arcade boards. I have about 10 boards from different manufacturers, and none of them seem to use hard gold on the JAMA connector. Is this something to be concerned about now that these boards will be cycled many more times with a super gun than originally intended? Can anything be done if there's a chance of premature wear?
I thought about that, and I actually designed a little doodad that's very simple. And he's right. A lot of the game boards are Hazel finish. It's just hot air surface leveled edge connectors, so they're very soft. One thing that you can do is just create a little extender that fits over the edge connector, and then your JAMA harness will plug into your little doodad. So it's basically replacing the connector with another connector, but you never take this connector off the original connector.
Yeah, that's
What I was thinking too.
I thought about this. I had 3 different levels of cost. One is every once in a while you just resurface the Hassel. That's the cheapest.
Mm-hmm.
2 would be what you guys said, but if you want it more permanent, you need some way to permanently attach that connector onto there, because as you're plugging it in and out, how do you know you're not just going to take it out of the how do you know which one's going to pull out? Do you want to put one of these in every one of your boards?
Well, that's what I would do. Yeah,
right,
for sure.
Okay, so then you need to, if you want it to be permanently attached to your board, you need to either solder the mechanical gold to the Hazel on the inside, or you need to glue it somehow, or you need to if you want it to not pull out.
I don't think that's necessary. Because in the grand...
Is it gonna? How do you know which force is gonna dominate when you pull it out?
Well, I mean, when you're exercising the connector off or on, I mean, I think if you're just careful, I mean, you can disconnect the JAMA interface without cycling it on the arcade board side. If you're careful, I don't think that's a big deal at all.
Yeah, that was just something that came to my mind.
You know what? I mean, a simpler way to think about this, if I'm kind of explaining this in a convoluted way, think of a front loader Nintendo, and think about the 72-pin connector being shit. But think about stuffing a Game Gear, or not a Game Gear. Jesus, fuck off, Bob. Think about stuffing a Game Genie in the front loader, and never removing the Game Genie. You're just using the Game Genie's cartridge port to interface with your games. Sort of the same deal.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the same thing could happen where you pull it out and the whole thing comes out, right?
That's right.
When you only want the game to come out of the Game Genie, but then you pull the game and the Game Genie out.
Effectively, what the blinking light win was, right? An extender that lets you.
No, it was a total cartridge replacement.
You've clearly never seen a blinking light win.
Yeah, I haven't.
But
that's a connector replacement. That doesn't augment the original connector.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear that the underlying issue is not that the Hazel is bad. It's the cycling of Hazel that's bad.
Yeah, and it's a good question too. This is why I actually thought about it. But if I get back to level 2, I mean, you could get a board that Zach talked about that like some intermediate board. But you have two options now. You could either get it in the soft gold and buy a bunch of them, and as those start to wear out, you just replace them. Or if you opt for hard gold, you're going to have keep in mind you have to pay at least like a $200 charge for the NRE on that. So unless you buy a lot, then you might not be cost effective on getting the hard gold.
You know, I would just e-make it.
Yeah, if you get that, then you could buy a bunch. It'll be cheap, and as those wear out, I mean they'll last longer than the hassle, but they'll still wear out, and then you could just toss them and then pop another one on. It might still be more cost effective to do that as opposed to getting the hard gold plating. And then if they're charging you like less than like 200 something dollars, then something's funky. Like they're not really giving you the hard gold. And typically I always ask for 30 micro-inch plating because that's what the IPC standard calls for, a minimum plating thickness. So
yeah, to add to Steve's point, I actually did some cycle testing with hard gold versus Enig versus Hazel, and and the Enig finish definitely was a major improvement on top of Hazel, right? So, like Steve said, if you're not...
Are those arcade boards Hazel?
A lot of them are.
If you're not ordering hundreds of hard gold boards, then it's not worth it, right? And I cycled, I think it was 300 times all of my cartridge tests, right? And the Enig performed fairly well on 300, right? So I'm not sure how often people would cycle a super gun on a JAMA, but I mean, if it's a few hundred times or less, then Enig could potentially be fine for that application, depending on how thick, and how what kind of quality you're getting from the PCB manufacturer, obviously. But the boards that I received, Enig performed well in a few hundred cycles.
So yeah,
cool. That was a good question.
Yeah, I really like that question.
Yep. Fantastic.
And I'll also add, I checked because Bob sent me a Genesis VA7 that has a triple bypass installed by Jose Cruz. Thank you very much. And the Sega CD edge connector on it inside is actually Hazel.
No
right?
kidding.
So, yeah. So I mean, and that comes back to the point I made about the whole issue is cycle amounts, right? So Sega isn't expecting you to cycle that connector hundreds of times, right? You're not going to plug in and out the Sega Genesis hundreds or thousands of times in the Sega CD, right? They're expecting you to do that a couple of times in the lifespan of your console, which is why that board is Hazel plated.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yep. Same thing with the JAMA. That's why JAMA is like you pop that in your harness and your arcade machine's going to sit there, right?
Right, until you either shut it down or you convert the cabinet to another game. So, maybe 20 cycles and then arcade game's alive.
And that comes back to, I guess, the point that we had earlier about properly designing stuff, right? If the manufacturer communicates the risk versus cost, Sega Hazel plates the main board of the Genesis because they're not expecting you to cycle that Sega CD connector in a proper use case of that console more than a few times in its lifetime. Then it's perfectly acceptable risk-wise to Hazel plate that, because you shouldn't wear down that Hazel edge connector in a normal usage case.
Yeah, and that's probably why my Genesis 2, the connector is all scratched up to shit, because I have my Sega CD sitting right there, and that's what I use it on when it's all connected. But all the time, I'll grab that Genesis 2, pull it off the Sega CD, and then bring it over to another station to do some testing, bring it back, slap it back together. And I only did that a few times before I looked, and it was, that connector is in bad shape now. So, wish they made it right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for you, the one person, it's not worth.
Fair enough.
It's not worth.
Although they probably made enough of those things that cost difference would have been minimal.
Blame Eli, Bob. Blame Eli.
Castlemania Games donated $5 to ask Bob and Renee if they have any tricks to learning finger tapping on guitar.
Renee, you got to answer this because all my answers are ghetto-ass answers that I taught myself.
I've seen this trick from a Canadian band that I love so much. They're called Protest the Hero. You need to check these guys out if you've never heard them. There's like a mathcore type of band. It's amazing. Use a hairband.
Love them. Really?
Yeah. So what they do is, and hold on, I'll explain. I obviously don't have a hairband because I don't have hair. But what they do is they keep a hairband just above the nut here, and when they go into tapping, they'll just slide it on to the first fret, so it kind of mutes all the strings, and then they can tap freely, and they don't get that whole extra ringing noise inside.
You actually don't need a hairband. There's a thing for that now, a Velcro thing. But funny, Mark Tierra, the guy who's made your intro music, one day he forgot that and he borrowed a hair tie from a chick at the show.
Yeah.
And the guitarist AJ, a good friend of mine, was like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen." And now he'll only use a hair tie just because it drives AJ crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you watch videos of Protest the Hero, you'll see them do that. They'll be playing, then they'll quickly slide it on, do their tapping part, then slide it back off and play.
My trick for tapping was, as always, do it within metronome at a slow speed and work your way up. But there was one solo I wrote. It didn't make album number 1, and then that fucking fell apart. So hopefully I'll be doing that one myself at some point. But it was like the double-handed, like Chris Broderick style. Not 4 fingers on each side. It was more like 2 or 3. But you just got to do it to the metronome and work your way up. But you got to remember that not all your fingers are ready for tapping. So you're going to practice it a day, and next thing you know, your fingers are going to be sore and all smushy. So you got to do it and like you're working out. Like if you haven't, like clearly I haven't done some sit-ups in a while.
Yeah, give us your expert working out advice, Bob.
First time I did it, you don't do too many because it's going to hurt, and then you kind of work your way up. But yeah, that's absolutely how I did it. There was one that I really loved that was like it wasn't even a fast solo, but it was very melodic and it relied on the sound of the tap. So.
My advice for this would be a little less conventional, but I would recommend that you first take her out on a nice date. Maybe get her a nice steak. Maybe take her to the movies. Doll her up and take her shopping. And then afterwards, then try to tap.
So if anybody hadn't seen the Twitter thread before, this exactly proves why Zach would lose this competition if the three of us ever got into a guitar off.
I guess the other advice, so the hairband advice is structural, but from a technique point of view, I would say when you're tapping, you need to focus on 2 separate motions with your right hand, right? The number one is you need to, hit the fret really hard. But the other important motion that I think a lot of beginners don't think about is when you remove your finger from there, is you actually have to do a motion that's kind of like a picking motion. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of like flick the string so that there's a noise coming out of it as well, right? I don't know if that comes out on the microphone, but
yeah, a little bit.
If you're only pressing and then removing your finger, that's not effective. You have to tap down on the fret, then flick the string as you remove it. Then,
tap and
then
flick.
The noise,
I'll try to remember that.
Yeah, then the noise, the volume will be much greater, and you're not going to need as much distortion to do it because you always want to use the least amount of distortion possible.
Can you play any protest songs? I've never tried. I love that band, but like I learned about them later on in life where I had no time left.
I learned a few of their songs when I was in Ottawa in 2011. I can.
Was it Hair Trigger? No.
I have one of their tab books, and some of their tab books are amazing because they actually have a spiral bind, so the pages will lay flat, which is awesome. All tab books should be like that. But they publish their own tab books instead of going through a separate publisher, so that's why. But
okay, so we have more questions.
Yeah. Can I safely connect an HD Retrovision PS2 cable and SNES cable to a splitter in order to connect to a single input?
The answer to this is going to be dumb.
Come on, Steve. You're taking up the
What?
whole screen, so you have to answer.
What? Why does that keep happening?
I don't know.
Can you
Oh.
can you do it, Steve? I don't think you can. I think that's dumb, by the way, but whatever.
Safely, you could do it. It just they'll interact with each other. The only times you should do that splitting method is when you have either a SNES or Genesis cable hooked in, because the active circuitry has a mechanism. I added this extra mechanism so there wouldn't be any backfeeding into the circuitry. So you need, it's only recommended to do that with the active cables. So Genesis, Super Nintendo, and then in 2034 the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
So,
Where can we get those Mini DIN 8 PCBs? I don't see them on DB's website.
The Mini DIN 8 ones aren't from DB Electronics. The Mini DIN 9 ones are from Renee. That's the Genesis 2. The Mini DIN 8s, I think Dan, Citrus 3000 PSI, put them up on his OSH Park.
And if that's a typo and they really do mean my Mini DIN 9s, they're on my GitHub.
Which you can get to through your website?
Probably not. I don't know. I don't update my website very often.
Google it on my site. I definitely have it up. I'll find the link in 1 second.
Yeah, there's a README with really, really large H1 headers with Bob's name specifically telling him how to buy the part from DigiKey because he couldn't find the bomb on triple bypass. Somebody cloned that repo into their own accounts a few days ago, and I thought it was hilarious because they kept the READMEs.
Something I really enjoy, kind of related to that, are the OSSCs that are found on AliExpress and the beautiful documentation that has Bob's name all over it.
Oh, that was so annoying.
It's so good. And I even like how it says that it's outdated documentation.
yeah.
Oh my God, Bob, you're such a fucking failure.
Those.
So good.
It's. Yeah, that's awesome. When you first showed me that, I was cracking up for a long time. Looks like Hako has a few ceramic filters. Is there a particular model number that fits the ZD915?
Yeah, there is. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'll make a note to tweet that. I'll put a tweet up.
Cool. That's all the ones we had in the queue. Is there anything
I want to
from
talk
chat, or was it?
I want to talk about a subject that's been in our subject tracker for a while there. The wrong mouse. Sorry, I got two PCs here.
Mister FPGA.
Yes, Mister FPGA, or why 118 repos controlled by a single man will undoubtedly fail.
What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, how do you not know?
So, I mean, because I've had a few discussions with this in the, I think it's the My Life in Gaming Discord. I forget. I'm being drawn into too many Discords lately, and I need to quit that. But anyways, the point is I'm not harking on the quality of Mister or anything like that. What I'm criticizing is the approach and the structure of the project that I think is completely wrong and 100% not scalable.
Because it's all controlled by one dude who has to approve pushes to the repo, right?
Pulls to the repo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only that, but every single module is statically linked within each repro. So for people who are not quite familiar with that lingo, what that means is there are multiple console cores which will use, let's say, a 68K core, right? Mm-hmm. And so even though the code is identical for all of those, it is in a completely separate piece of code in every single repo. So what that means is
if somebody makes a change.
Yeah, if somebody makes a change or discovers a bug in the 68K core, it has to be changed individually in every single core which uses the 68K core, and that's quite a few repos, right? Instead of
And growing every
dynamically,
day.
yeah, instead of dynamically linking that code.
Doesn't that go against whole like programmable logic? Are you supposed to even use it where you make instances of modules? Are you saying
Absolutely, yeah.
okay?
It completely goes against every single tenet of software development that ever existed since 1949, right? So,
Do you have any insight onto why it's done like that?
no, I mean I can only speculate as to why. I mean, I mean, either someone
Well,
Is it an
No,
old thing that just that's how they used it at first, and it's gotten much more complicated now, and they haven't restructured it to better fit how it is now? I don't know.
that could be. I mean, like if it started as just one repository of code and people started adding on to them and grouped them under a single account in GitHub, it would make sense that it's built that way. But that should have, I mean, anyone who's mildly familiar with software development should have caught on fairly early and said, oh, well, you know, this static linking of code is bad and is 100% not scalable.
Well, that sounds incredibly. I mean, I really don't know anything about this, so this is kind of the first I'm really hearing about this. But that sounds so remarkably counterintuitive. I guess I would imagine that enough people would be frustrated by this that they would, I don't know, fork it off, maybe?
Because what happened is during the time that I tried to get involved and I got no traction in my initiative, so I just said, fuck it, I quit. People were submitting updates to the video scaler, right? Because at first they were using a video scaler that was proprietary to Altera, so you needed to, you couldn't build the Mister FPGA core without either hacking an Altera license or actually purchasing one, which cost thousands of dollars. So, and people were trying to produce their own video scaler, which is commendable. But what was happening is they were updating the video scaler code in, I believe it was the Genesis core. But then they had to physically copy paste that code into all the other cores in order to update them.
Oh man, what a nightmare.
Yeah, instead of simply having a dynamically linked library, which is how you should be doing things in the software world.
Did you bring this up?
Of course I did. That was the whole point of my initiative in October, November, was I said this should be built like how MAME is built, right? MAME is a sort of like a repository of, this is a 68K core, this is a Z80 core, this is a PSG core, and in order to build the Genesis, you need to pull this piece and this piece and this piece, and you tie them together, and now you've got a Genesis, right? And if you build another system like a Neo Geo, well, it's going to take that same 68K core, it's going to take that same Z80 core, but it's going to glue them together differently, right?
Right.
It's not a completely different piece of code for the exact modules that are shared within those cores.
Interesting.
That's what makes zero sense to me. That's why I said, okay, I'm not gonna push.
But how would you implement that? Is that just something that you could like re-upload the stuff somewhere else that already has that implemented, or is that like?
Well, it sounds like unless the guy is receptive to this type of change to the code base, the only way would be to fork it off and then just design it yourself. Because you're gonna be making these changes, and if he's not receptive, you're just wasting your time. Because you're gonna try to push them to the Git, and they're gonna get lost forever.
It's exactly it, because the project has reached a scale where it's so big that changing it hurts that person a lot, right? That they have to completely change the way they work. But I don't think it's scalable anymore, right?
And it really should be. This is a pretty huge project.
Absolutely, yeah. It's only going to get harder and harder to manage. Like this is a project that needs to be built upon dependencies and not be built upon statically linked code for every single core. Because what's going to happen is some cores are going to fall through the cracks, the least popular ones. Like, let's say somebody finds a very important bug in a Z80 core. Well, they're going to go and they're going to fix the Master System and the Genesis and the Neo Geo right away. Sure, fine. But what about the ColecoVision? Is somebody going to think about, oh, well, because we found a bug in the Z80 core, I've got to go and manually fix all of these scores individually instead of only fixing one and then having those cores dynamically dependent upon one Z80 module.
It's really interesting that you bring that up because I've heard a lot of complaints about the way the Mister project is scaled. But what you're talking about is a very valid black and white ones and zeros complaint. And most other people's complaints, with all due respect, are just people that have never dealt with your typical grumpy IT guy. And, you know, I'm friends with Zach, so I know exactly how to deal with people like that on a daily basis. It's I mean, I'm picking on Zach because he's here, but in all seriousness, like that's the main complaint I've heard is that, you know, the person in charge could be grumpy, but it's been very few like straight up ones and zeros responses to that, so that's pretty interesting.
I guess, I mean, I don't know how such a project like that could operate and be so monolithic, I guess.
It's
and
very
survive
weird.
and survive. That's very strange. I don't know, Renee, but so that's why you kind of washed your hands of it, huh?
Yeah. I pushed very hard for. I said, let's hard fork, as Nick said, because I mean, Nick heard me rant for 2 minutes and he saw right away that the only way to fix this was to hard fork, right? And it's quite easy for anyone who understands software development to see the only way to fix this very rapidly is to hard fork.
But isn't this exactly the same thing that happened with OpenELEC and LibreELEC?
I'm not familiar with those.
LibreOffice and OpenOffice, same type of shit, I guess. Come on, Linux guy, you don't fucking know what OpenOffice is?
I've used
OpenOffice, but I don't know any story about like there being competing visions or whatever.
Same overview of one dictator that people just get sick of and then they break it off to their own. But the problem always is the same. It doesn't matter what the project is. The problem is that the evil dictator usually contributes 75% to a project. Right. And now people are so very relieved when they forked it off to something else, and then they realize, fuck, now we got to put some real work into this. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a major architectural change. Like you'd have to be going into basically every core, stripping things out and then making it all modular.
Yeah.
Which is like not a trivial amount of work given the number of systems that thing supports now.
It's not easy at all, and it goes back to Bob's point, is that whoever started building this probably did not envision that it would get so large.
This is like what happens at all companies too, though, right?
Yeah.
Like you start and the code base grows and grows way beyond anything you imagined at the beginning, and all of a sudden you run into this major issue of like, we gotta fix this giant immovable object. It's just like the way of things.
So it's not, Renee, it sounds like you're just, until they go down this modular path, that you're not going to have anything to do with it, but it sounds like it's inevitable. It's just when, right?
I wouldn't say it's inevitable because it could just die off if you know the code starts getting too broken.
It could keep going by the simple will of many people wanting it to work and giving themselves 100 times more work by, you know, constantly statically linking everything together, right? There's nothing preventing people from giving themselves so much work and still making it work. But for it to actually evolve properly, because I always saw Mister as like a main kind of project, but in the hardware world instead of the software world.
Me too.
Right? Yeah, and if it's gonna grow and become something like that, then I do believe it has no choice but to go in a proper modularized and dynamically linked route. There needs to be a repository of modules, and then cores draw from those modules, right? There's no reason why the 68K core from module A should be different than the 68K core from module B, because those were the same damn chips in the devices.
So maybe it's a stupid question, but bear with me for a second. From just an arm's length point of view, what would it take to do that? Are you talking about creating something that doesn't exist? Or are you talking about, okay, we already know how to do this because it's been done with MAME, so we just need to import everything into this architecture and then pull from that?
No, it's a lot of work. You have to go into every single repo and see where all the common code is, and then
It's
dynamic.
A lot of upfront work, but if you do all the upfront work now, then everything going forward is going to have a huge payoff.
Kind of like your Dreamcast cables.
Those are never going to have a payoff. We're never going to.
You walked right into that.
I'm sorry, did someone say payoff?
There would be a tremendous amount of refactoring at first, right? But the benefits down the road are 100-fold.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, if you're done on that topic, I don't know if anyone else has anything. Chris Larson sent us a super chat just showing support, and he wanted to know what each of our favorite games are lately.
Tetris 99.
Tetris 99.
I don't have one right now.
Lately it was Monster Boy, the new one, and then it's just been driving me insane. I don't even think I'm going to finish it. I think it's just going to piss me off too much.
Is it pretty difficult? Because
there
Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap, like, for a while there, I thought the same thing. I was like, this game is too difficult.
Well, Wonder Boy did this. And then it hit a point where I was like, it's too hard. I could go back again and play it, but I don't have time. And Monster Boy did this. Okay. And now it's at the point where I'm like, do I want to go back and spend what might be an hour or might be 10 hours finishing this thing off? So no, probably not.
I'm excited for the Quake remake that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Oh yeah.
That'll be sweet.
Gotta love that id Software.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I haven't really played much.
I really haven't either.
The last thing I played was my friend came over here to pick something up, and we played some co-op Tetris on the Tengen Tetris for NES. I never played a co-op Tetris before, and I thought it was quite
co-op,
interesting.
It's not versus?
It's co-op. Well, you can do versus, but they have a co-op mode.
So what is co-op mode? Do you have two sets of things falling, or is one controlling placement and one's controlling rotation?
You have two sets of pieces falling, and you got a bigger play field.
Oh, okay.
And you have to structure it and talk to each other and communicate where you're going to drop stuff. And you got to get out of people's ways. Like if I have a square piece and I'm here and the well is over here, I have to move out of the way so they can get the long bar over. Yeah. It's quite interesting. I played that for 20 minutes.
No, that's cool.
That's
the rare Tetris.
Yes.
Well, cool. Well, how's the music in the Tengen Tetris, by the way? Is it good?
There's five different things,
mm-hmm.
and you could also put it on mute. So I guess you could funnel in your own music from your boombox or whatever. But,
you're a record player.
Your tape cassettes.
I think it's wrong to play NES Tetris with anything else but Music 3, personally.
Well, they all have The Tengen Tetris has like 5 different musics, and they're all different, and they're all Russian music.
Is is any of them the classical like Tetris tune? Because like
the Game Boy one.
yeah, the Game Boy song.
The Game Boy one,
iconic-
none of them are the Game Boy.
I love that one.
Because even on NES, none of them are the actual classical
Yeah.
song.
Right.
Of course not. That was during the Soviet Union era. They weren't going to put that music in there.
Right. They're all Soviet music. So.
Right. Right.
It says Soviet Mind Game on.
Did you ever play Tetris with music too?
Is that the one that goes?
It's the craziest one.
I like the one that's all airy.
Yeah, that's
But
music 3, I think.
When you're
Yeah,
watching the
Music 3 is
CTW,
awesome.
when you're watching the CTWC, doesn't it cycle through all 3 of them like in the background?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Yeah, but whenever it's music 2, I go like this. Blah, 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 blah.
Now you guys are making me want to go back and rewatch that Tetris documentary. I loved that one a lot. Not From Russia with Love, the one about the...
Ecstasy of Order?
Yeah, there you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
From Russia with Love was awesome, though. That one was great, too. And I'd seen a few bigger YouTubers get the story wrong, which kind of cracked me up because they could have just referenced the half-hour documentary that got it right. So, yeah, whatever.
You know, I totally unrelated to Tetris. I was watching a really funny, actually, it's a really shitty documentary, but I was bored. It was about the fighting game scene in New York, and it was following this guy. And like, I guess he was like some sort of big fraud or something, and he would like coordinate these teams or what. God damn it, what is the name of it? But it was a big Street Fighter game. It was a big Street Fighter documentary, basically, and it was basically like this dude that was like, he was like notoriously known around New York, but he was a guy who, I guess he was shady. He was shady as fuck or
There's
something.
one that's notorious around here, and I'd seen him on a different documentary, and I dropped his name once, and I might as well have gone to Compton and dropped the N-bomb. That's what happened at a tournament when I was in, because I said his name and everybody was like, "Oof, he's not fucking welcome around here." I'm like, "Oh boy, okay."
Huh.
I just saw something on YouTube. I didn't mean to start some trouble. My bad. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yep, good documentary
Mm-hmm.
about nudes, but. All right, I'm
All right,
done,
boys.
guys. I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done with this.
Let's,
I gotta go throw up now.
All right, sounds good. I guess we'll call it a night and be seeing you again soon.
Can I just? I want to add one thing.
Oh, sure.
There have been some comments about my sofa
Jesus.
during the chat. This, I mean, as gay as it looks, this is the most comfortable sofa in the world. It is mine. There is
I got
no
drunk
price.
on that sofa.
Yeah, there is no price on it, and it is never leaving this basement.
I got a question. Looking at the beautiful fabric, do you ever, I don't know, masturbate on that sofa?
I'm sure
Yeah.
I farted
What
on it.
happens in Kapu Kasang?
Kappa's casing. We went over this at the
Kappa's
beginning of our
casing
video.
stays in Kappa's casing.
Well, we know that you like to beat it with your friends over a bag of potato chips. I'm just wondering if you yourself personally, you know,
Actual.
Yes, the
Masturbate.
actual, yeah, the beat it on the couch with a friend refers specifically to this couch. Yes, and I have no fears of displaying it on camera. There are no stains on this couch, so that answers your question.
Get the black light.
let's get the black light out. I don't quite believe that. Fluorescents don't lie.
Wait till Poppy comes over. Please be stayed.
Puppy.
Poppy is a little sloppy.
All right,
All right.
boys. We'll see you hopefully in less than 2 months this time.
Yep. Yep. Sorry for the delay, but you know, we hate doing this.
All right.
All right,
you
guys.
guys.
See you guys later.
Yeah.
Peace.